Good morning. We are middle of looking at the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, authored by the Alter Rebbe, chapter 273, Reish Ayin Gimel, discussing the laws that we learned in the Gemara, which is Ein Kiddush Ela B'Makom Suda. Kiddush is not valid unless it is done in the presence or in the place of a meal. Yesterday we went through three designations of moving spots. One house to another. That's the primary prohibition, the primary invalidation, one house to another. With the exception of, and in that case, even if you had in mind to eat in the other house, it doesn't constitute eating in the place of a meal, and the Kiddush is invalid. There is the exception under extraneous circumstances to rely on the view that says that if you can see the place through the window, from the place you eat to the place you're making Kiddush, then it has that, it's qualified, but only in certain. It was that view within 4 amas of the spot to make Kiddush. Okay, that was designation one. Designation two is within the same house, but different rooms. That we said, as long as you have in mind to make Kiddush and to eat in the other room while you make Kiddush, then that's also okay. Alter Rebbe added, don't rely on that in the first instance because there are those that disagree. Designation three is within the same room, different spots. In that case, if you had in mind, everybody agrees, no problem, you can move from one place to the other. Even if you didn't have in mind, also okay. Best to know in advance that you're going to be moving or to not move at all. And we added in the footnote there that even if you don't see the spot where you're going to be eating from the spot that you're making Kiddush, let's say it's a big L-shaped room, because it's the same room, it still constitutes making Kiddush in the place you're eating.
Does that really matter? Because even if you go to another room, you don't have to see other room.
Here is even if you didn't have in mind here. Here it's even if you didn't have in mind. Because it's the same room, even if you didn't have in mind at the moment of Kiddush you're going to be moving, because it's the same room, even if you don't see the other spot, it still counts as eating in the same place of your Kiddush because it's the same room. And again, to the point we were talking about with Alan yesterday, this is all related to the Kiddush factor, not the Hagafen factor. The bracha over your drinking is unrelated. It's a separate set of laws that's somewhat related, and the Gemara is going to take us down that journey after we've done this. But for now, we're focused on the validation of Kiddush. The validation of Kiddush, not the valid. Correct. Kiddush requires a meal in order for it to be valid as a Kiddush. As for the pasuk for Karasel Shabbos only, the pasuk says you shall call out the Shabbos a day of delight, meaning when you call out the Shabbos, that is to say in your Kiddush, it should be in the presence of your delight, your meal. This is where we are. So one more detail about moving location, and then we get to the duration of how long between your Kiddush and your meal, how much you have to eat. What if you're making Kiddush for someone else? That's coming now. So halacha daled, halacha number 4, which I think is on the third, fourth page there. Halacha number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, keep your eyes on the footnotes because we're going to be going to there as well. Come in. We're just starting. Perfect time. Sukkah shibisech habayis, daled, halacha daled, halacha number 4. Sukkah shibisech habayis, a sukkah that's built in one's home. If you look at footnote 13, there he says, i.e., one removed the roof from part of a room and erected a sukkah there. So you're in the same room, but the room is split in terms of its halachic designation. Half the room is a sukkah, half the room is not. Right? Now you could do that without even making any wall between the two. Because a sukkah only has to have 3 walls. So if half your roof is off, so you have a 3-wall sukkah, the 4th wall of the sukkah being open to your roofed area. That's right. It's just an open.
Right.
Yeah, like people have a flowing living room into dining room without any wall partition.
Open concept.
Open concept, right? That's the modern term. But then he adds, even further, even if you have an actual separation between the two halves of the room. So he's taking it even further. Not only is it open concept, even if you closed it. So you have a room and you took off one roof for a sukkah, and then you pulled a partition. Actually, my uncle and aunt in Australia have it. Now that I'm thinking about it, the back half of their kitchen is like a glass sunroof, and that glass sunroof is on like a wheel that you can roll out, and then it covers like this patio area, making the inside of her kitchen open, and then that's her sukkah. And they have like a what's it called, like an accordion partition wall to separate between the kitchen and the rest and the sukkah. So even if you had that, says the halacha, says that it's not considered a separate room.
But you have the roof, same roof.
Well, half is a sukkah, half is not.
But you're under the roof.
Who are you? Who? When? You're saying if you're under the roof, you're not in the sukkah?
Yeah, because remember, we learned that if there's an overhang, you can't sit near the overhang.
Right, he's sitting in the sukkah, this person. Or he's sitting in the side. The question is, are they considered two different rooms? Because they have two different roofs.
Yeah, it's gotta be two different roofs.
It's two different roofs. One's a sukkah roof, one's a normal roof, but it's one big room. Even if you put a partition there between the two halves of the room. Says the halacha, it's not considered two individual rooms with regard to the halacha of Kiddush. It's considered one big room.
So that's even more lenient than 2 rooms in
a house. Correct.
Right.
Why? Because this wall that you made, this partition that they made, is not meant for actual functionality. You only did it for the sake of the sukkah. Because you want to have a 4-walled sukkah, or maybe this partition is your 3rd wall, depending on how the sukkah is structured. So that wall that you made to separate between the two halves of the room, the half that's under the schach and the half that's under the normal roof, that wall is not a fixed wall for the sense of I want to have now 2 rooms in my house. It's for the purpose of the sukkah. So it's inherently a temporary separation, and thus in essence they have the halacha of one room with regard to the Kiddush. Therefore, yeah.
Would you use this room and bathroom?
For what?
This is not a wall.
This is a permanent structured wall with a door between them.
Okay, but you'd open it and close it.
The door.
Yeah.
It's not considered. It's still a wall though. It's not considered. We're talking about no wall. You just pulled the mechitza and you pulled the partition in to separate between your sukkah and the rest.
For example, you wouldn't have a mezuzah.
You would not have a mezuzah in that. That's correct.
Like if you would have made that same sliding partition in a 2-room house, that may not qualify as a temporary.
No, that's correct. If you made that same partition and you put it there permanently because you want to have 2 separate rooms, then it would get halacha of 2 different rooms. Here,
this is because it's a sukkah.
That's right. It's only there for the sukkah, and therefore the wall inherently is not a permanent wall, unless the room is considered one big room.
What about the shul downstairs, where that big wall?
I was thinking about it. I don't know the answer. I was thinking about it. Our wall downstairs, is that considered a permanent structure or not a permanent structure? It's up most of the time, but even when it's up, it's visually a movable wall. So I don't know.
But I think that's more of a permanent nature because you want to create separate rooms at times.
At times you want separate rooms. At times, I would say I would.
That moment when it's closed, it's considered.
I would even agree with you. I would agree with that, especially considering the fact that if you look at the signage on the walls into these 2 different rooms, one says the shul and one says the social hall. So it's psychologically, I guess, we've designated it as, not psychologically, what's the right word? Intentionally, we've designated them as separate rooms with the ability to be conjoined, right? Different flooring, there's even a different height of the roof,
right?
Different light fixtures. So,
like if the separation can be removed and put back on without breaking it, then it's not.
Then it's considered temporary.
Yeah.
By that definition, our wall downstairs would be considered temporary.
I think it's temporary. Do you even have from going into the synagogue to the hall?
It's a good question. It's a good question, but the reality is you don't have a mezuzah. Even the temporary doors that are put in there, we don't have mezuzahs on that one either.
Right, because I think
so.
You move it around also, no?
Good question. Maybe ask the rabbi when we go to know better. Good question. I thought about it. I don't know.
Doesn't the ceiling have to be where you can see the stars?
Okay.
So you can't have any.
So again, the guy cut out half his roof and put schach down.
The sukkah.
Yeah. He has a room. As I was just describing, my aunt has a glass roof for the back of her kitchen. That glass roof slides off, and it becomes a sukkah. So half the room is under the schach, and half the room is under a regular roof.
She closed it when it rained. Makes it.
In Australia, it doesn't rain that much there.
You can't do it.
But in theory, it's a button. Click a button and close it.
You can't do it downstairs.
Sorry,
You can't do it downstairs.
No, you can't remove it.
can't do what downstairs? The sukkah?
Yeah.
No, of course not. We're talking about a hypothetical where a guy has a sukkah. We're just asking if the wall downstairs is considered a permanent wall. Not the sukkah. Okay, so let's make it clear. So we have a sukkah. Half the room is a sukkah. Half the room is not a sukkah. Says the Alter Rebbe, it's considered one big room, even if you put up a wall. But the wall is there just for the sake of the sukkah. Okay, here he says because the wall is not used for functionality, it's only meant for the sukkah. Our wall downstairs is certainly meant for functionality. That wall is for functionality, not for the sake of a mitzvah. No, it's for function. Correct. That's right. It's meant for functionality. So from that perspective, it would be considered two different rooms. Anyway, now lefichach, therefore, in Kiddush b'bayis, if the person made Kiddush in the house, under the roof part, why would he be doing that? Maybe because it's raining. Let's just say he made a Kiddush in the house, in the part of the house that's under the actual roof.
The same room, but it's super.
Right? So maybe he didn't make the Kiddush. That's what I'm saying. Maybe he didn't make Kiddush in the sukkah because it's raining, let's just say.
Not a relevant issue.
The Alter would not discuss why he's making Kiddush, although I see in the footnotes citations to articles, which I'm sure they discuss it there.
Not really the point.
That's right. Yeah, that's in the footnote 15, they're right, i.e. because of rain or cold, one initially thought to eat in one place, and then changed his mind, decided to eat in the other. So it's raining, so he makes Kiddush in the house, thinking he's going to eat there, under the roof. But then he decided, you know what, let's go to the sukkah, clear it up, let's say.
Normally you couldn't do that within rooms of the house.
That's correct. Or maybe the opposite. He made Kiddush in the sukkah because it was clear, and then he decided to go under the roof because it started raining or something. Same outcome.
One room.
That's right. He does not have to go make Kiddush again because it falls into the third category, which is one corner to another rather than considering one room to another. Because if you went from one room to another in the house, you'd have to have a mind during your Kiddush to eat in the other place. But over here, because it's considered one room, even if you didn't have a mind and you moved,
or you couldn't see the other part.
Even if you couldn't see it,
which would be in this case.
If it's, let's say, windy and raining and all that, and the partition was closed when he made Kiddush, and then it cleared up, and he opens the partition and goes into there.
It seems to be okay.
It would be
okay.
Okay.
That partition is only there for the sukkah, even though you can't see the other spot.
Which is the third case.
Which is the third case of going from one corner to another.
You can't see the corner of the room.
That's correct, because you're in one.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a good example of one room where you can't see one place to the other.
Right.
Make Kiddush here, you don't see the spot behind the bookshelf here.
Right.
Right? Okay. Continuing. But if the walls of the house itself separates between the interior of the house and the interior of the sukkah, that would be like ours. You have your sukkah on your balcony. So the walls of the actual structure of your home separate. It's not the wall. The walls that I have around my house are not there to separate. It's not a partition to separate between my house and the sukkah. It's built for the sake of my house. Right. So even though it's adjoining, that's right. Even though it's adjoining, and now I open the doors. Right, you have sliding doors in your kitchen. You open the sliding doors into your sukkah, but there's still a wall there, and that wall is not built to separate between your house and your sukkah. It's built for your house. So even though the opening of the house is open directly into the sukkah, those sliding doors, gets the law of one room to another in the same house, and therefore, if you're making Kiddush in your house and then decided to eat in the sukkah, or vice versa, you'd have to have in mind during your Kiddush that you want to move over. Fair? Now, what if your sukkah is not attached to your house at all? But there's airspace of the courtyard separating between the two. So your sukkah is not on your balcony adjacent to your house directly. It's on the grass area. So you got to walk onto the balcony, walk through open sky, and then get to your sukkah.
Still part of your domain, right? It's considered another room.
Unless that courtyard is shared by others. So let's just say,
public,
or the courtyard shared by others. So let's say the courtyard shared by others, and you have your sukkah out in the courtyard. And by the way, on Kent, you can see that. I think it's on Kent Street, right? Kent or Carlton, in one of those streets. Yeah, where you have like 4 or 5 houses built like in a C shape around that open area in the front. It's like I put a sukkah in the front. That's a shared common space between everybody. So then, this constitutes the law of going from one house to another, or from one house to a courtyard.
Right. And then you'd have to see.
So the laws of you have to see the place. You have to see the place. No intervening public thoroughfare. Is that courtyard open to the public or not open to the public?
And you'd have to be able to see where you made Kiddush from that other location as well.
Say again?
You'd have to be able to see, you'd have to go where you're.
You have to be able to see the place where you made Kiddush from the place where you're eating. Right, through a window or something. Okay. So halacha 5. That concludes the discussion of the various different designations of locations, which is basically 3: house to house, room to room within a house, or within one room, from corner to corner. So it's house to house, room to room, or corner to corner. That's the way the halacha describes it. And then this last halacha, we just put the sukkah. Sorry.
Or the one where there's a courtyard or separation.
Right. So in each of these categories, the scenarios change based on what the situation is. Can you see? Can you not see? Public thoroughfare between, not public thoroughfare before between. Did you have in mind? Do you not have in mind? All these various different details play into each of these categories. And the last thing we did was place the sukkah in that context.
It's good to place the sukkah in the context because it's so important.
It's prevalent.
We have a week
Right.
where we're eating in the sukkah.
So what did we learn? That the sukkah can actually be all 3.
Yeah.
If the sukkah is half of your room, it's considered one room, corner to corner. If the sukkah is adjacent to your house, like on a balcony, it's considered room to room, one house. And if your sukkah is in a shared courtyard, it's considered from house to house. So the sukkah could be in all 3 designations, depending on how it's built. Okay.
When you talk about Kiddush in the sukkah or outside the sukkah or all
Yeah.
does it include like leshev basukkah or no?
If you're not in the sukkah, no. Presumably, this person's.
So for leshev basukkah, you can't do it.
You have to be in the
same
sukkah.
rules and
So
stuff.
we should make this. It's not the halachas we're discussing here, but just to clarify, the halacha is that the first night of sukkah you have to make a kiddush in the sukkah, even if it's raining.
Right.
So here you must be talking about a kiddush later, either Shabbos Chol Hamoed,
Yeah.
Chol Hamoed kiddush, or the second day Yom Tov maybe. Right. In which case or let's say if you're doing Chabad custom where you make kiddush on Shmini Atzeres, where you eat Shmini Atzeres in the sukkah also, so you make kiddush inside and you went outside, or it could be Shmini Atzeres. Let's say Shmini Atzeres, not Chabad custom, which means you're not eating in the sukkah. So you make kiddush inside and you decide, you know what, it's nice weather, let's go sit in the sukkah. Same law would apply. Any of those kinds of scenarios, that's right.
Sure.
Right. Okay, halacha hey. Now we get to the time frame between your kiddush and your eating of the meal. Says the Alter Rebbe, Tzarech lechel b'makom hakiddush. One has to eat the meal in the place of the kiddush, as described above in the various designations. La'alter achar kiddush, directly after the kiddush. This word la'alter is not so simply translated, and we'll get to footnote 19 in a moment. La'alter, which means immediately or directly after. So you have to eat the meal directly after the kiddush. Let's first finish halacha 5, and then we'll get to footnote 19, which is important. Yeah. But if he only ate sometime later, he did not fulfill his obligation. In other words, the halacha to eat your kiddush in the place of a meal is not just a geographic designation, a geographic requirement that has to be in the same geography of your kiddush, but also temporally, right? If I could be sitting in the same spot and I'm giving a class now, but then I went to do something else and did something else and something else, and I drank a coffee. Did I drink a coffee in the place of my shir? Well, depends what you mean by the place. Geographically, yes, I'm drinking the coffee in the same spot in my shir. But if I mean, did I drink the coffee with my shir, with the class? No, I didn't drink the coffee with the class because it was an hour later, 2 hours later, after doing a bunch of other things. So temporally speaking, you also have to make kiddush in the place where you eat, not just geographically, which means your meal has to follow directly after your kiddush. And therefore, you have to go back and make kiddush again before you eat. Not because the eating is lacking a kiddush, but because your kiddush lacked the eating. There's no difference between whether it's a long interval or a short interval. We're going to get to exactly how long that is in a minute. But let's just first finish number 5, because the details of this are very important here. When is this all true that you have to eat kiddush? You have to eat the meal right after your kiddush. If initially, Kiddush, when he made his Kiddush, he had no intention of eating right away when he made Kiddush. He had no intention of eating right away. But then he made Kiddush, and someone tells him, you have to eat in the place of your Kiddush. So he says, okay, I'll eat. That's when we apply this rule that he has to eat right away. Because if he waits some time later, his mind is off his Kiddush, and now we're separated between Kiddush and your meal. And now it's no longer eating in the place of your Kiddush, just like my coffee isn't in the place of the class because it was later. Right? So if when I made Kiddush, I was not expecting to eat right away, but then I was alerted to the fact that I need to, so I decided to eat in order to fulfill the requirement that my Kiddush be done in the place of my eating, that's when we say that you have to eat right away.
So in that case, he did not fulfill his obligation?
Only if he ate right away, then he did.
After he was told?
Let's say he was told, or he reminded himself, whatever it is.
Or whatever it is.
But yeah, then it has to be right away.
But it's already...
We'll get to what he has to eat soon. Now we're talking about the requirement to eat in the same place. We'll get to what you have to eat soon. Yeah?
If you had no intention of eating, for example,
Okay, let's see.
Say Saturday afternoon, you do Kiddush here in the synagogue downstairs, and I don't need to go home.
So you have to make Kiddush again. That Kiddush wasn't valid. What do you ask?
No, just by the time he was aware that he has to eat, what if there's a time lapse within that time?
Okay, so there is no time lapse. That's the point. He's saying there's no time lapse. There cannot be a time lapse.
There is no time
If there is a time lapse, there's a problem. We'll get to how much the time lapse is in footnote 19 soon.
Okay.
But there cannot be a time lapse between his Kiddush and his eating if at the moment of Kiddush, he did not know he was going to eat after. Right? If when he made Kiddush, he expected to eat right away. But some sort of unforeseen circumstance prevented him that he couldn't eat till later. So I made Kiddush. I was expecting to go wash and eat right away. And someone stopped me for a conversation. And the conversation took 10 minutes. And then I went to wash and eat. Did I make Kiddush in the place of my meal? Did that break separate between my Kiddush and my meal? Says the Alter Rebbe, no, it does not separate. Because when I make Kiddush, I was expecting to eat there. In other words, it's kind of like a...
It says that you have to go back to the place where you did it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you don't have to go back and make Kiddush again.
No. It's
only if he stayed in the same place from when he made Kiddush till he ate. But if he went out in the middle, so you have to go back and make Kiddush again. So let's make this clear. There's 3 scenarios. Okay. So for 3 scenarios. Scenario 1 is the person made Kiddush, not expecting to eat right away. And then some time elapsed, and he eats a meal in that spot. That Kiddush is not valid. Because when he made Kiddush, it's unrelated to his eating. And therefore it's not considered Kiddush in the place of the meal. Even though it's technically in the same space, but it's not in this, the Kiddush wasn't made in connection with my meal because I wasn't expecting to eat. And because there was a time lapse between. Scenario 1.
Kiddush in vain.
Yeah. It's invalid Kiddush. Scenario 1. Scenario 2 is I made Kiddush without expecting to eat at all. But then right away, someone alerted me or I realized that I have to eat. So I ate right away. So in that case, even though I didn't have a mind to eat right when I was making Kiddush, because it happened right away, it's considered conjoined and my Kiddush is considered in the place of my meal, it's valid. Scenario 2. Scenario 3 is I make Kiddush expecting to eat, but something stops me from eating right away, a conversation. Now, I did not leave the room. I'm still in the same room. And then 15, 20 minutes later, I eat. That Kiddush is valid because the Kiddush was made in connection with my eating. I never left the room, and the entire time I knew I was about to eat. Follow? Scenario 4. Okay, washing doesn't consider. We already said this once before that washing in the other room doesn't consider leaving the place. Scenario 4 is I make Kiddush here, expecting to eat. Something happens. I am told that I have to run home to help my kid with something. Even if I'm coming back to eat in the place where I made Kiddush, I have to make Kiddush again.
And the reason for that is
because when it comes temporal issue. Here's the difference. When it comes to geography, Kiddush in the place of your eating, it has to be geographically in the right place. So therefore we have 3 designations: house to house, room to room, corner to corner.
He's just going back to where
but if it's when it comes to the temporal Kiddush, It's a question of association. Can I associate your Kiddush with the meal you just ate? Well, that will depend. What was I thinking when I made the Kiddush?
You had the right intent in that.
So I knew I was going to be eating here. So even if there's a long 2-hour break, as long as I never left the room and the entire time I know I'm here in my place of Kiddush and meal, then the association is still there, even though time elapsed.
The geography helps in that case.
Right, but with the association of it. Because I never left the room. I knew from the beginning I was going to be eating. So the association between my Kiddush and my meal is still there.
Even if it's 2 hours.
Even if it's 2 hours later. Okay, we'll see the time lapse soon. But even if it's a long time lapse.
Time and geography kind of gets.
Because it's associate. That's why I think
Yeah.
association is the right word. When it comes to the temporal issue of Kiddush in the place of a meal, it's a question of association. Can I associate the eating with your Kiddush?
I have a question about like a real world example.
Yeah.
I do Kiddush, let's say Friday night, and then we put the kids to bed before Kiddush. I do Kiddush or whatever. He starts whining. I have to go upstairs after my Kiddush before I ate to go deal with it. And sometimes it's 10 minutes.
Ooh,
15
good
minutes,
question.
20 minutes. I go back downstairs to eat. Do I need to do Kiddush
Good
again?
question. Good question. What constitutes going out of a place? Does that count as going out of your place or not?
It's a different room.
Ooh,
It's not a different
good
building.
question. Very, very good question.
You have it in mind to do it.
He made
I
Kiddush
had
for his
mine,
wife.
yeah.
They knew they were going to eat right there.
Right now, right
But
there.
But then the baby was crying, went upstairs.
upstairs.
Is that considered leaving the place to make Kiddush again? Ooh, very good question.
But you got it in mind to.
Yes, but he left the place. But he left the place.
And time lapse.
And time elapsed.
So the question is.
Ooh, very
is
good question.
The association.
Very, very good question.
Is the association.
Still there. Or is association broken because you left the place?
Within
Yeah.
the same dwelling.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say like this. If one of you stayed downstairs, the association's still there. I have no source for this other than my rationale of the association element. It's the same dwelling, and because and we were planning on eating together. We made Kiddush together. She's still here eating, right? So that would be my hunch, but that's a very good question, and I'm going to do a little research, God willing.
Guests, for example, you don't have to come back and redo the Kiddush for everybody.
Very, very good question. What's considered leaving the place?
Well, here it's using the case of leaving the dwelling. Yeah.
So here in the footnotes, they tell us to look at the story of Rav Huna in the Gemara. In the Hebrew footnote. What was the story of Rav Huna in the Gemara that we learned? Rav Huna, what was the story of Rav Huna? Rav Huna is the one who made Kiddush. The candle fell, so he had intended to eat in that spot, but then he went to his son-in-law's place and made Kiddush there. Okay, that's not in the same house though. That would depend. Is it the same house or not? He made Kiddush again a second time because he went to his son-in-law's house, right? Because the candle fell in his house.
Right.
Was that the same building? Not the same building. That would be the answer to our question. If it's a different building,
I think they considered it when we studied it as the same building, as an extension.
it's not 100% clear. The other case where he went from upstairs to downstairs, that definitely is the same building. But here, he went to his son-in-law's house, and the way Rashi puts it is, it's Beis HaMishta. Was like the place to celebrate his son's marriage.
Geography.
Right, but the same thing applies here.
Right.
Right.
It is
Because actually
also
over there, he's eating in a new place.
Right.
He's
And
eating in a
it's
new
not
place.
In the same dwelling.
He's eating in a new place. Yeah,
That's
very
case
good.
Number 2.
He's eating in a new place. Yeah, very, very good. So why are they telling us in the footnote to look in Rav Huna? Very, very good question. With Hashem's help, I will do some research and write up the results. Good question. Okay. Now, finally, end the last paragraph on Halacha Hey. But if when he made Kiddush, he was not expecting to eat till much later, even if he had in mind to eat in a different house, and then afterwards he decided to eat right in this place, he doesn't have to go make Kiddush again. So to explain, here's a hybrid. This person made Kiddush, right? When he made Kiddush, he said, you know what, I'm going to eat in 2 hours from now. I'll make Kiddush now, but I'll eat in 2 hours. Or he said, I made Kiddush, and I'm going to eat down the street. Now, as far as the temporal issue goes, there's no separation between his Kiddush and his meal, There's the association element because he made Kiddush with the intention of eating a meal. What's the problem? The problem is geographically. Halachically, you're not allowed to do that. Halachically, you cannot make Kiddush here to have a mind to eat somewhere else and then eat the meal somewhere else. Right? But that's a geographical issue, not an association issue.
Right.
So the association he satisfied because when he made Kiddush, he had in mind to eat, even though he was incorrect in not having a mind because he had in mind to eat in a different house or to have in mind to eat later. But the association is still there. And therefore, if right afterwards someone told him, hey, in order to fulfill your Kiddush, you have to eat a meal right where you are now. So he says, okay, I'll eat now. Says the Alter Rebbe, that Kiddush is valid. Why? Because the association is there because he had in mind to eat, even though his eating was associated with something later. And geographically, he's satisfied because he ate right afterwards.
In this case,
But here he says miyad. He ate right away. He has to have eaten right away. Which I guess is similar to what he said earlier. Right. Which is similar to what he said. So it's not 100% clear because in the opening lines of this halacha where he said that if a person made Kiddush without any expectation of eating and then was alerted to the fact that he needs to eat, it has to be la'alter, directly after Kiddush. But here he says miyad, immediately. Immediately is different than la'alter. Is it the same word, different word? What does he mean exactly? But it's quite confusing, yes.
Action supersedes intent.
So long as the association was satisfied also,
Right.
because during his Kiddush, he had in mind to eat, even though he had wrongful intention.
He had to still be there
Correct.
and all these things. Couldn't violate
in
the
his
geographic.
Correct. Yeah.
in his case,
Yeah.
it boils down to what we're gonna live later.
Which is what?
All depends on how much you eat.
Right. So
You can grab a piece of bread and say, I ate.
he's giving a hypothetical that's still valid. I mean, the solution we know. In other words, before he goes to pick up the baby, just eat a piece of cake or something, as we'll see soon, or just drink another cup of wine, as we'll see soon,
That's
or
not
even drink the
happening.
cup of Kiddush, which might even be enough, as we'll see soon. But a hypothetical, though, he's still right in the question, and it's hypothetical.
But I feel like a lot of maybe it's just an impression of that, but a lot of time you'll find that let's say someone who went to synagogue comes home Saturday afternoon and will say to the other person, like, you did Kiddush, I already did Kiddush. Does that imply he ate at the synagogue?
He must have.
Drank enough water?
He must have eaten at the synagogue
It can't
something.
be that he just did Kiddush and then came home. And
That's right. He has to have eaten and drinking.
he is,
Yeah. Okay, let's look at footnote 19 and we'll conclude with that. And we'll continue on. Actually, I don't know if the story is Monday. I have to wait to see. Monday's Victoria Day, so I have to wait to see what time davening is here. We'll be in touch. Okay, so footnote 19 says like this. We're talking about here the person. A person has to make Kiddush, has to eat temporarily in the same place of his Kiddush. Right? So the person made Kiddush, did not have in mind that he was going to eat, but then was alerted to the fact that he has to eat in the place of his Kiddush. So he has to eat la'alter, said the Alter Rebbe. La'alter was translated in English as directly after. But how long is that? So let's see footnote 19. In another context, in his Kuntras Achron, note number 2 to section 263, the Alter Rebbe defines the term la'alter, translated here as, quote, directly after, as referring to an interval, quote, significantly less than 15 minutes. Approximately 10 minutes according to the Badi HaShulchan. Yeah, it's a funny phrasing. Significantly less than 15 minutes. We have to look it up there to see why he says that. But the Badi HaShulchan, which I think is Rabbi Chaim Noah, says approximately 10 minutes. In our context, there are authorities equivalent. There are authorities, again, Badi HaShulchan, who allow up to an interval equivalent to B'chdei Achilas Pras, which is 4 to 9 minutes. And others, Eishel Avram, who permit up to 72-minute interval. The thinking here is 49 minutes is the amount of time it takes you to consume a, quote, meal. Is that how much time is allowed to elapse? Or 72 minutes, which is the amount of time it takes to digest the meal. Okay. Badi HaShulchan and Mishnah Berurah, lost my thing here, 273.14, emphasize that this restriction does not apply when the interruption is made for the purpose of the meal. You're going to wash, and sometimes you're going to wash takes a long time because you have a lot of guests, and they're all lining up to wash at one station. Says the Mishnah Berurah and Badi HaShulchan, this is not an issue. Now, first of all, it's not an issue even if you didn't expect to eat right away, but certainly in our context where we know we're eating later, so the temporal issue is not a problem anyway, because the association is there, because at the time of my Kiddush, I knew I was eating in the spot. But this would be even if I wasn't expecting to eat right away. But what stopped me from eating right away is the necessity of preparing the meal, i.e. washing. It's not considered a temporal separation. Because again, on the temporal question, it's a question of association. And the association of your Kiddush to your meal is still there, even if you stop for 20 minutes to let everybody wash. Furthermore, as a support, Badei Shulchan notes that at the Pesach Seder, an extended interruption is made between Kiddush and the meal. You make Kiddush at the beginning of your Seder, and sometimes it can be 2 hours till you eat. In between all the manashtanas, all the insights that people are sharing, people have to go wash.
Right.
Especially if you have a big table, and everybody's got to line up to wash for urchatz, and then karpas doesn't count as a meal because it's too little, as we'll see soon, and it's also a vegetable. Which also doesn't qualify, as we'll see next week, right? But clearly, the association of your Kiddush to your meal is still there, even though it's been 2 hours.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
The whole Seder is meant to sanctify the day.
That's right. When you sat down to make Kiddush, everybody knows we're in here for the long haul and we're going to be eating at some point. So this takes me back to my original point. When it comes to geography, Kiddush in the place of your eating and geographically, the issue is geography. Is it the same building? Is it the same? Is it a different building? Is it the same room?
Right. It's not a sliding scale of relativity.
Correct. It's a clear thing. It's an absolute.
Right.
Are you in the same designation? Because you see it, and that extends to geography, right? But here it's a question of association. So if
The proximity of it.
it's right. In my experience, is my Kiddush related to my eating? That's the question. In my experience, my Kiddush related to my eating.
That all depends on the fact.
That's right. Which would further, by the way, if this is correct, it would further tell me that even if you went upstairs to get your baby, still because your Kiddush is still associated with your meal. If I make Kiddush in shul here and I have to run home, then to say that my Kiddush is associated with the meal that I'm eating after I come back 20 minutes later, no. If I stop for a conversation for 20 minutes on the way to washing, I'm in the same room, so I can still associate the Kiddush with my meal.
You can also relate it to the meal. For
Exactly.
example, if I go up to get some quiet, it's so I can enjoy.
That's also a good point. That's right. That's a good point. Yeah.
For example, Friday night, because you mentioned the Seder now, but let's say Friday night, if you come home, we do Kiddush, and then I start, or my dad will start talking about the Parashat Shavua or Divrei Torah or something for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then it's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Correct. It's all part of the association with the meal. You knew when you made Kiddush you're going to be eating here, and there happened to be an interruption by conversation. You never left the place, whatever the place is. But let's just say the place means the building, right? For now.
So it seems like the intent of having the meal immediately helps to sustain the association a bit more.
Exactly.
Than when you don't.
When you don't have it, then that's when you get stuck.
Really
how much time do I have to? That's right. Otherwise, otherwise the association gets lost. That's correct. If I didn't have that's right. If I didn't have in mind during my Kiddush to be eating right away, that's when I have to eat right away. Otherwise, the association is lost.
And literally, time isn't.
Then literally time makes the association. But if not, then geography might play into separate things, the association, because I left the room. Right.
A lot of factors. The proximity of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Down in Florida, when the Seder, there was 150 people.
Sure.
Imagine the lineup.
It's a good 2.5 hours from your Kiddush till you're eating. Yeah, 100%.
Lineup just to wash.
That's right. And the association is there. That Kiddush is more associated to your meal than someone who makes Kiddush, leaves to chat with his friend for 3 minutes and comes back. Because when he left the room to talk to his friend for 3 minutes, that is unrelated to anything between his Kiddush and his meal, unless it's considered an interruption. But what you're doing for 2.5 hours is all related to the Pesach meal. It's part of the process. So the association is still there, even though temporally speaking, it's been 2.5 hours. Right? Okay. The next two things to cover that we're going to, God willing, next week is number one, when I make Kiddush for someone else, who has to be eating in that spot? Me, the person listening to the Kiddush, that's going to be coming up there. And what if we're in different rooms? I'm making Kiddush in this room, and you're in the next room. Do you have to eat where I make Kiddush, or do you eat where you are listening to Kiddush? That's coming next. And after that, we'll get to what do I have to eat to constitute a meal that's in the place of the Kiddush? How much, what, and so on. Have a wonderful day, and good Ner Shabbos. When you learn the halachos of something in depth, you end up appreciating that mitzvah 1,000 times more. I'm telling you from now on, when you make Kiddush, you're going to be so much more aware. How did we get into this?
Yeah.
From the Shulchan Aruch. How did the Gemara get to this? Because the Gemara is the Gemara was discussing.
I thought you said we're going to study about Passover.
We're coming back to it because the Gemara was discussing not eating before Pesach, so you have a good appetite. Okay. And if we're not eating before Shabbos, you have a good appetite. Okay. But what happens if you're eating just before Shabbos and you're interrupting your meal by covering the bread to make Kiddush? Okay. So now we're going through this whole discussion about interruptions and meals,
Okay, and then you
and
decide.
interruption between Kiddush and this. So the Gemara discussed this halacha. So we're going with this. Every time the Gemara discusses a certain halacha, we'll get to the Shulchan Aruch about that halacha.
We're starting from the last chapter of Psachim, right?
That's correct.
We're going in through the Seder night.
That's correct.
And this
So it's
is
gonna come-
all a lead up.
There's going to be another 6 or 7 pages of the Gemara about Kiddush before we get back to the Pesach later.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, when we're done, you're going to appreciate Kiddush every Friday night. And you're going to be so aware of all the things that are happening in your Kiddush because they're learning all these things. Okay, wonderful day, Eden. Good Ner Shabbos.